Whilst Black and William have provided unequivocal evidence that assessment for learning has improved standards of achievement, there is a possibility that if it's not administered correctly, there may in fact be no improved learning gain, or that students may react negatively to assessment for learning processes. Therefore, the purpose of this presentation is to outline the principles of assessment for learning in secondary education. The first principle is that explicit quality marking criteria should be provided to students in advance to enable them to self-assess throughout the learning process. Now, the benefits of doing so is that it allows the students to understand how they will be assessed. It gives the students advice on how to prepare for the task. They know what's expected in their responses, and it also allows them to know how many marks are actually going to be awarded to each section of the task. And the students know exactly what they need to do to obtain the marks allocated. So in an assessment task marking rubric such as this one, the student receiving this would know that they have independently investigated the food trend. They have provided a thorough report on the food trend covering several issues. However, they've only been able to outline a link between the food trend issues and issues in society. However, they have been able to provide a wide range of specific examples to support their investigation. So the student can clearly see which areas of their assessment they have done well and which areas are possibly requiring a little further discussion. Principle 2, educators must provide feedback to students that is meaningful throughout the assessment for learning task. In order for it to be meaningful, the students have to actually understand the feedback that's provided. Now, at times feedback cannot help the children because they can't actually access it. So reasons why they may not be able to access the feedback is because they can't understand the teacher's writing. Maybe they're not sure what's meant by the teacher's comments, or the language that is used is beyond the student's ability, or maybe just general vague words such as good or excellent or ticks have been put on the paper, which doesn't actually explain to the student which components are good. So feedback such as this with a couple of ticks, an underline, bit of highlighting, doesn't really give feedback to the student as to which parts are good or which require further development. Whereas this one is much more specific about areas that have been done well, and some advice has been given to the student as to how to improve on their report here. Principle 3, educators must provide individualised feedback that is supportive and promotes learning throughout the task. And as noted by Nordrum and Hargraves, students commented that the personalised comments were much more useful than the rubric that was provided because the teacher's actually talking to you and telling you what you need to improve on. Now, this allows students to actually progress to their next level because this feedback is specific to the student rather than just global generalised feedback about how the whole class has gone. It must be noted, though, that sometimes feedback can be negative in nature. So an example such as this, which is littered with negativity, can actually provoke emotions which might in fact inhibit the student's learning. In fact, I had students last year ask if I could write in green pen because they felt that the red pen provoked a negative sort of vibe, and because they see red as being negative, and they were less inclined to read the feedback because of all the red on the page. Principle 4, opportunities for students to peer assess helps increase engagement and helps them to self-reflect and engage in independent learning, and this should be provided regularly throughout assessment for learning. The benefits of doing so is that it makes the students actually reassess their own work because they were conscious of the fact that it was going to be read by their peers, so they rechecked it prior to handing it over to another student. It also encouraged the students to use the rubrics provided because that's how it was going to be marked by the teacher. However, they did indicate that they felt a bit anxious about doing peer assessment and providing critical feedback to their peers. However, after regular opportunities and practice in doing so, they felt much more relaxed and were more engaged in self-reflection and giving critical feedback to their peers. Principle 5, educators need to provide a quality learning environment with social support to encourage engagement and therefore learning gain within assessment for learning tasks. And as noted by John Hattie, that teachers account for 30% of the variance of student achievement. Therefore, if the teacher can provide a positive classroom environment with social support, that helps to encourage students to engage in their learning and participate in discussions and feel more confident to ask questions that further promotes learning. A negative environment in the classroom, however, does inhibit learning because it can encourage poor behaviour and negative emotions, which inhibits the learning process. Principle 6, teachers must work together in order to shift the practice towards assessment for learning within their school environment. Now, all of this should be led by the principal, who actually acts as the conductor of this shift, because it is the role of the principal to ensure the school is organised, has enough resources, and it's also at the principal's discretion as to whether they will provide funding release to allow teachers to engage in professional development discussions about assessment for learning, to attend conferences, and it's up to them to simply engage the teachers with assessment for learning practices to improve practice. Principals themselves actually commented that they weren't simply enablers of the change, but they actually conducted the assessment change process across the school.